because I was asking about eclipse earlier today, and because it of course evokes celestial bodies and the sun and moon and what have you. And it does relate very directly to this piece, again,
it does,
because of the fact that the windows and the significance of the windows and the cast light from moonlight or sunlight.
Right.
And so again, it's a two-part piece out of the Indiana limestone, so it's reductive. But it does have sort of also a very anthropomorphic feel, and you did say that it's also influenced by the two halves, or two halves of like a kachina face.
Right.
So just like this one, what you've done is made these slits and they line up. But again, it's another interactive piece. It doesn't lock.
Right.
And when we flip the camera around, we can kind of point it out. It doesn't lock, but what's nice is there is a slit on both sides which represent the kachina's eyes. And when they're put together face to face, or butt to butt, the slit comes across. But you can also, you like this piece for viewers to put it however they want, and then they can actually overlap it this way and then move it back and forth. And so it becomes more like a moon or a sun.
Exactly.
Or as it comes completely pulled apart, it could be a face.
Right.
So it has this breadth of again, captures the spiritual aspect of, or the immortal aspect and of the kachinas, but yet the celestial aspects of the sun and the moon. And so it's really an interesting piece, but again, it was, and I didn't even know that when I curated this and put these together, but man, these are right in a straight line with each
They
other.
are.
It's like, this is the power channel right here. And Nicole's at the end of it. The ultimate power. And so, so that's what I think is fascinating about this work. The other one too, then while we're here, is this one. I love this piece because it's really big. It's a nice, good sized piece. And again, the elements line up on the sides, but they look sort of like maybe they're not balanced or something, which is kind of nice. There's a little internal imbalance, but it's very solid. And this is another one where it's broken, and these all sort of come together, and you have to assemble it.
Right.
And but again, the four, even though it's not four corners, you were saying last night when you were talking, this also represents sort of the four directions because
Right.
there's four elements.
Four elements, right.
So, so that's this is one also has a very nice tie to it, to again this whole body of work, but just formally a whole different sort of way of doing it. And then there's another piece work on the other side of the room where it's four shapes like this that come together as 2 over 2.
Correct.
But again, and they lock this way and this way between each other, so it makes a solid piece. But they could also, if somebody wanted, they could just leave one out, or you could leave them sort of on their sides. I
Right.
mean, there's any number of ways somebody could reassemble these.
Well, I was working on these, I came up with the idea is I started using these thin curve wood carving chisels, but then started welding these various different carbide tips to it in various different angles. So I was starting to really manipulate the break, and so I could control the protrusion and things of that nature. So that enabled me to really make these larger scale pieces and make them interactive.
Well, it's great from a curator standpoint, or from a gallery, but also from a collector standpoint, because then these just disassemble.
Right.
And you and Nicole sent all of these like in separate big boxes, which was nice. I mean, because individually these elements are much easier to handle.
Right.
But also it's so clever because you also really wanted to have this sort of engagement with the viewer, and so there's nothing more engaging than having to assemble your own work. It's like having to cook your own dinner when you go to a restaurant. But it's, which we were just talking about, right. Which is like these restaurants where people say, "Oh, do you want to make your own eggs?" And you're like, "No." But what's interesting though is it kind of opened up a whole bunch of different avenues for you. I didn't even realize that. So yeah. I thought this really wasn't something you cooked up to do this way. It was out of necessity.
Out of necessity,
but it turned out to really be fortuitous.
And, right, and then start developing it more and more, and being able to control it more and more. And so it enables me to invite the viewer or collector to be involved again. So you can disassemble, create your own compositions, creates a dialogue between myself and the viewer.
Right.
But then it also relates to just that idea of what is necessary, I think, especially now, and the idea of carrying on a dialogue.
Right.
That discussions need to happen and change needs to happen, and things of that nature, and that things can come out of just genuine dialogue and have discussions and different ideas and things like that, but come up with different solutions.
Yeah, no, this one's really grand. I like this because it's for people who really like just pure geometry. It's so great for that, but it also has these really just sort of nice illusory sort of elements, the way you sort of just break that off a little bit, and the back is the same way but going in the opposing direction. So there's this really great internal dialogue between these pieces as well. And the fact that you could actually just sort of leave a chunk down if you wanted. I don't know if this one, I can't remember, can this one actually go this direction if you want it? Could it flip or?
If you want it vertical, it has integrity and it's all balanced, so you
That's
can
what I
definitely
thought.
do
So
it,
this one's another one that could go that way. This one is an interesting one too. It's similar, but a little different. It's actually only 3 elements, but it looks like there's more, and that middle bit is actually 1 element.
Right.
So, and again, you can see the 2 halves of a kachina face and the eyes with the negative space. But there was also some other interesting things, the way you picked this limestone to bring back sort of the ceremonial issues around water. So if you want to talk about that, I hadn't really noticed that until you just mentioned it.
Yeah, well, with our ceremonies being very agricultural people and located in the middle of the desert, a lot of our ceremonies, the bringing of moisture plays a very important role. So a lot of our ceremonies pertain to that or relate to that, and the idea of bringing of moisture. And so
the carving.
The carving and then the vertical lines, what that refers to is the idea of that rainfall and for the nurturing of the crops and the plants and things of that nature. So that's what that relates to.
And again, it's very subtle, it's very reductive, and in a weird way for me anyway, this reads so retro, and it just has such a 1940s or 30s sort of feel to it. And now that I'm looking at it, that's what I think too is, every time I look at these, I see something different. So this element here, this half a kachina face, nothing's like perfectly lined up. You always bring in these sort of a little bit of discord. So
right.
This is sort of moved back on this side. I realized it's complemented over here with this moving back on this side.
Right.
The face is smooth here. It's got the vertical lines here. So there's real thoughtfulness to how you have a different experience as you walk around this piece.
Right. It's a different experience, different angles, but the idea of also trying to create that composition, that balance to everything as well.
Yeah. No, they're really beautiful. And while the camera is sort of this direction, let's talk about, this is the only bronze in the show. You've had a little bit of a lull in your bronze work. Was that COVID related with the foundries and things?
We had the foundries and things, and then right. And then there's a lot of the foundries closed, unfortunately, in Santa Fe, and so it's been challenged and things of that nature.
Yeah, that one into suitcase.
Right.
Yeah, that's really a
and so
loss.
But I'm working back with the bronze pieces again, and these are a fabrication as opposed to a casting, so it's all cut and welded and put together that way.
Right. So it's hollow. It's actually much lighter. But the imagery is interesting. It's a butterfly, and of course everybody always loves butterflies, but there's really more to it than just being a butterfly in terms of the Kopi culture.
Well, and then it's the idea, it relates to the idea of metamorphosis, how things change over time, but then it has also the hidden elements of, again, our culture and the traditions. And so what you're seeing is basically the wings here are 2 halves of the kachina face that became the wings, the negative space being the eyes there. And then the actual body relates to kind of how I started with the kachina dog carvings. And so that design is really emulated after those, like the little figure, the
yeah, it looks like
figures.
a figure.
So there's the idea would have been the body, and then the hands are usually in this
in this
little manner here,
yeah.
and so that's what that little negative space indication is, and then the body there. And so that's what that refers to. So again, there's a lot of the cultural elements that I use to really develop and really construct these pieces, but those usually will be hidden elements and become what I'm kind of looking for in the composition.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully, because I think I saw a lot more of your work was bronze before, and that's why I think when you sent me these limestone ones, I don't know, a year ago or so, I was so surprised. But I mean, but everybody always sort of changes over time, and different materials. You have to sort of stay with the material, I think, to really hone your craft with it.
Right.
You just can't do a one-off limestone thing. So if you're going to do it, also when you buy it, you probably have to buy a big chunk of limestone. But so you have to sort of embark on these things to really.
I tend to fluctuate, and then I really like working with all the various different types of material. The natural material is kind of something I've always been really drawn to. I started out with wood initially, and then, but I don't know, there's something about working with natural material. It's just it's almost a relationship. Because with bronze and things, you can always go back and correct things and do things of that nature. But
right.
with something like the natural material of stone or wood, or it's its own element, and so it's a permanent thing, and so it's almost like this relationship that you have to develop and work with.
Well, I think with also the Hopi culture and just your interest in trying to have this work sort of relate back, and with everything being sort of centered around the earth, is actually really ties in so nicely. I agree with you. I think the stone and the wood are such wonderful elements. But you use a huge diversity of wood, which we should probably be standing in front of wood when we talk about this, but maybe we will. We might move over to the newest work.
Okay.
And you can talk about the wood, because I'm kind of curious how you pick the woods. Is it just purely formal, like it's light versus dark and things like that? Or are there other representations? So that's why I was kind of curious about when you pick wood.
It's just a fascination with the different grains. Sometimes the different regions they come from. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's a unique thing of a gift from someone or something like that. I've had some friends, clients, collectors that have gifted me some things. So they're remodeling something, an old structure, and they harvested this. So it's this recycled stuff that will come, and I have some yellow heart and things. So it's interesting how things arrive in my studio on occasion. I have this marble piece that I just completed, and what we found in my dad's studio from like 1970s in his old studio space. And so he said, I don't do this any longer. He gave it to me. And so I started working on it. And so I was going to say, and 30 years later, what's going to be the title?
No, I like that actually. It's actually, but again, think about it. It's this whole continuity of past lives, current and future, right?
Right.
So I mean, everything sort of gets recycled. Everything sort of,
sure.
Gets sort of renewed again. So that's great.